we
sure how
start
this
with
thing
paragraph 3,
works. I
and
have
I'll
to
write it
try to.
down to make it easier. But it's
I
just a
don't know
text.
how this. I don't know how to get back to the index.
Uh, and when you say the online one, is it at the
Okay.
acm.org or
Yeah, whatever Foundation for Inner Peace. Okay. There's anybody? Okay, so which one is it?
the Holy Encounter, chapter 8, section
Okay.
3, and paragraph 3 as
Okay.
well. We'll read a little
Okay.
bit of background as well.
Okay.
And it starts with the first sentence is the will of the Father.
Okay. The will of the Father.
The will of the Father and of the Son are one by their extension. Their extension is the result of their oneness, holding their unity together by extending their joint will. So basically, it's setting the background foundation of the idea that in heaven there's only oneness. So the Son and the Father are basically one, there's no distinction. Um, now, it uses that wording because we have to think about it from that perspective. But in a sense, you could say is even correcting the Christian notion that like there's God, then there's Jesus who's separate, then there's the Holy Spirit that's separate. The course is pretty much saying that in truth, there's a continuing a connection between them that's unbroken to the extent that they're really one. So basically, the wording is used for our convention rather than for reality. This is perfect creation by the perfectly created in union with the perfect creator. And that's what the union is about, the union. The father must give
Yeah.
fatherhood to his son. Go ahead.
Mm,
The
I'm just
father must give
listening.
fatherhood to his son because his own fatherhood must be extended outward. Now, there's a part of the course that's earlier where it talks about creations. So it says basically God extends himself as Christ, and then Christ extends himself as creations. So this is hinting towards that, or basically referring back to that. But I'm sure we'll get to that verse as we continue to progress through the course. You who belong in God have the holy function of extending his fatherhood and placing no limits upon it. Let the Holy Spirit teach you how to do this, for you can know what it means only of God himself. So the key part of this verse is when it says, you who belong in God have the holy function of extending his fatherhood by placing no limits upon it. So what would you say the limits mean when it says no limits upon it? What aspect would you say would be us placing limits on that extension?
Um, I don't know.
And it's not a difficult question. It's not a hard question. Don't think too hard about it. Just think about the things that we talk about. We talk about forgiveness. So what would be the opposite or the counterpart to forgiving or the miracle?
Oh, I guess holding negative feelings towards people, not
That's right.
forgiving.
That's it. Not forgiving, holding grievances, and I'll write that down. So we have grievances. I might have spelled grievances wrong. We have judgments, uh, uh, negative feelings, and I guess it would be better to say negative thoughts because our negative feelings only come from our initial negative thoughts, and the ultimate negative thought is judgment, the preeminent negative thought. So basically, when we read earlier in the course, when it talks about the miracle worker and the job of the miracle worker, the job is to place no limits. Even going back to the introduction of the course, when it says, um, you know, we removing the barriers to love's presence. Because that's what it's about, removing the barriers, that's placing no limits, which means letting go of our judgment. So this is very important. So let the Holy Spirit teach you how to do this, or you can know what it means only of God Himself. Now, one interesting thing here it says we can only know of God Himself, and then it says let the Holy Spirit teach you. So really, the Holy Spirit is sort of the memory of what came before, the memory of the fact that there's something more than what we think we have here. And that's basically look into the right mind or look into unconditional love, like the form that you looked at to it that one time. Just basically anything that's not judgment, whatever the symbol takes. Some people think of it as Jesus. Some people think of it as the Holy Spirit. Some people think of it as unconditional love. Doesn't really matter what term we give it. It's just some idea of something greater, something that's loving, something that's peaceful, that we can access to help us to think from that perspective. Now, here is the key verse. Here is the key part. Paragraph 4. When you meet anyone, remember it is a holy encounter. As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. As you think of him, you will think of yourself. Never forget this, for in him you will find yourself or lose yourself. Whenever two sons of God meet, they are given another chance at salvation. Do not leave anyone without giving salvation to him and receiving it yourself, for I am always there with you in remembrance of you. Right? So let's go through this line by line. When you meet anyone, remember it is a holy encounter. As you see him, you will see yourself. So this is why it's important to keep in mind that everyone is the same. It's very tempting to look at ourselves and see ourselves as different and see that person as different. Like we were talking about the rich and powerful people who do horrible things. It's tempting to look at those people and say, we're different. We would never do that. But the fact is, if we see them that way, what we're seeing is what we did, and it's always the case. So, and we read verses like this before. Are we putting it in a
What we
in a
did
broader con?
at
Go
another
ahead.
time. What we did
Say it
at
again.
another time.
Well, I mean,
What?
literally in that moment. So this is the thing. So let's look at another. So keep
Well, I mean,
bookmark this part.
I'm not doing those things now, so it doesn't make any sense to me now. I
Understand?
could
Let me go.
understand
Let
that
me.
I might have done it in another lifetime because I'm still subject to time.
True. But the well, two things. The miracle isn't. Secondly, it's not about what we do. So let me find another verse that will illustrate what I mean. Let's go to uh let's go to chapter 21. Let's go to the very first part of chapter 21, the introduction. And we'll
Okay.
go through a few verses like that, where it says reason and perception.
Reason makes perception.
Well, the chapter is reason and perception,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right? And if you go to paragraph 2, it says damnation is your judgment,
Yes.
right? So damnation is your judgment on yourself, and this you will project on the world. So this is a monumental statement. It's saying when we damn someone, when we judge someone, it's really our judgment on ourselves, and we project that outward and see somebody else's damn. See the world as a damn, and all you see is what you did to hurt the Son of God. If you behold disaster and catastrophe, you try to crucify him. If you see holiness and hope, you join with the will of God to set him free. There is no
Well, yeah, I
choice.
can see holiness and hope, but I see it as a potential in people
Well, well,
who
try
are
this. Try
actually doing
try
things
try
like
holding your thoughts for a
look at what's
moment.
happening in
Try
Palestine.
holding your thoughts for a moment, because I understand this is some difficult stuff. But
I
try
would have
holding
to
your
not
thoughts for
even be alive to to
well, try
to
holding
think
your
what's
thoughts for a
happening in
moment.
Palestine
And
is
what we'll
okay.
do is get through all the verses, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. So
Okay.
hold your thoughts
Okay,
for a
I can
moment
do that.
now,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and, and we'll come back. So
Okay.
So we'll look at this verse, and I'll find another one as well, and I'll tie it back to what I'm saying. So the damnation is your judgment on yourself, and this you will project upon the world. See it as damned, and all you see is what you did to hurt the Son of God. If you behold disaster and catastrophe, you tried to crucify him. If you see holiness and you join the will of God to set him free. And this is the key line. There is no choice that lies between these two decisions. So here we're seeing the mention of two decisions. Now we spoke before, we looked at that image and we saw how, there's the blue dot and there's the wrong mind on the left side and the right mind on the right side. And we're choosing between those two. So let's look at more about these decisions. We'll go to one more verse. And let me see if I
What's the
could
next?
find, I found a similar one, but I want to see if I could find the specific exact one I'm looking for. One moment here.
Okay.
This one is not coming to me. I had it last week, but it's not coming to me at the moment. But this one is still due. All right, so we have these two decisions. And then it says, uh, 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 going back to the same chapter 21, the decision that we make, the choice that we make, we project that out, we see it in the world. Now, when we look at, when we, so let's say well, let's look at it this way. When we talked about forgiveness, we talked about different kinds of forgiveness. And,
Yeah.
there's one where you could just, and we'll go over many as we go along. But one process of forgiveness is the problem is not you, it's me. So you did something to me. I feel upset. I feel angry. But I say, okay, I feel upset. I feel angry because of whatever you did. But, whatever you did is what you did. And as we said last week, we could take whatever action we need to take at the level of the world. And, if somebody's jacking my car, I could call the police, and if find them, I can press charges. We could do the normal stuff. But the reason why I'm upset is because of the choice I made, because I chose the ego, right? But since a choice for the
Right.
ego is a
Okay.
choice for separation, for decision, for division, a separate world, and God is oneness, that choice can't be real as well. Because if there's only oneness, and this choice for separation made a world of separation and division that can't be real, then a choice can't be real. So I'm innocent as well, right? The mind that chose the ego is innocent, and the world can't really do anything to me because I projected the world. That's the effect. You remember that line of forgiveness before?
I I mean, I'm kind of following you.
Okay, so that's just how you think about it. But the key part of this thing is that, okay, and I'm talking about us. I'm talking about you when you're forgiving somebody. Whatever you did, I'm upset because I chose the ego. I believe I'm guilty because I separated from God. I believe I separated from God. Going back to that, the ego's reward is our individual self. So I believe I separated from God. I believe I destroyed oneness. So I see myself as guilty. But if the world,
When
if the
wait, will you say that again?
certainly, I believe I'm separate. I believe I chose the ego and separated from God. So, so why don't I draw it, and it might help as well. So remember that we had above the line, we had God, we had reality. And are you able to see the screen pretty well where I'm drawing?
Yeah, I can see it pretty well.
Okay. And remember on that image, we have the wrong-minded box and the right-minded box, the ego and the Holy Spirit. We believe because we wanted to be an individual, we believe we chose the ego, and then that projected the world. And this is the world we live in. That seems like a prison, right? So we
Yeah.
believe as one mind that we're guilty, that we destroyed heaven. Thus, in the world, we get here and we project that onto others. That's our projection. That's when we're angry. That's when we're judgmental. So
Well,
this is,
I mean, okay, so this world is a projection, but I mean, there's like real trees and they're actually alive, and there's animals and there's other people, and like, I'm not creating all that, am I?
well, remember, we're not talking about at this level, we're not talking about us as an individual. We're talking about this dot right here. This is the universal mind. This is us as universal mind that includes everyone and everything, right? So I'm not talking about you, Ayanda, and me, Darryl. I'm talking about this universal mind that includes you and me and Ken and everybody. This one universal mind that projected everything. So we are a projection as well of this universal mind. So this universal mind is projecting. Now, what happens is when this universal mind projects everything, every projection seems to be self-aware. So I seem to be me, Darryl. You seem to be you. And now, as you said, I experience myself in the world. You experience yourself in the world, and there's trees, and there's birds, there's other people. So now this is what we seem to be. So now we seem to be stuck here. Like you said, it seems like this is a prison. And now we get to our individual projection. So there was the universal projection. Now we seem to be here. I've seen to be an individual. And the projection here is judgment. So right here, the projection is judgment. I believe I'm guilty as universal mind. That's why I projected the universe. And now I seem to be an individual in the world, and I project as judgment. That's why the verse we had read just now, if you go still in chapter 21, if you go a bit earlier, the very first part of chapter 21, it says projection makes perception. That's where that's from. There's the first projection of the universal mind that projected the universe. And then now that we hear, we continue that same process by projecting onto other people, by judging other people. And that's why the process is forgiveness. Okay? So if we was to go back to that verse in chapter 8, so we can scroll back to chapter 8, that's why it says, uh, uh, you who belongs to the paragraph
Which
3,
part of chapter 8 was it again?
chapter 8, 3 and 3. 8,
3.
Roman
Okay.
numeral 3, paragraph 3.
Okay.
So that's why it says, and I'll write down as well, we had an aside in chapter 21 intro. So I'm not going back, I'm just writing it down for the recording. And this will be recorded so you could review it later. I'll upload it. So going back to chapter 8, section 3, where it says the will of the Father and the Son are one, that's where it says in that paragraph, you who belong to God have the holy function of extending his fatherhood by placing no limits upon it. So now going back to the image here, we have the miracle. So judgment places limits, projection, right? And now the miracle undoes that. So the miracle, and that's now we go back to the thought process I was saying earlier. The miracle says, okay, I seem to be in the world. You seem to have done something on me, to me, but now I know that my anger, my hatred, my judgment of you, that's a projection of something that's in me. And what is it that's in me? It's the guilt that I believe is mine from having chosen the ego as one mind. So now the problem is not you, the problem is me. The problem is my own choice for the ego. And since the choice that I made a world of separation, and as you read in chapter 8 just a moment ago, God is a creator of perfection. This world, the projection can't be real as well. So that means that this God here is innocent as well. You're innocent of making me upset, of making me angry, because I projected my guilt onto you. I'm innocent because this guilt really comes from my choice for the ego, but I'm innocent as well because it is an illusory choice. It's a choice that didn't have an effect on reality. So this tiny mad idea that we chose, it didn't affect anything above that line. So I'm innocent as well. So I'm innocent for choosing the ego, and now everyone is innocent. Now again, that doesn't change the fact that if somebody jacked our car, we you'll call the police, to use the example earlier, and press charges or whatever. But in that moment, we won't be hating the person and angry. We will feel better. Okay. Let me know if there's any questions about this process. Now, let me know if there's any questions at all along this line of thinking.
Okay, so the feelings have to do with our own guilt,
That's right.
separation.
That's right. Because
That
we chose the
makes,
ego. That makes sense, you said?
yeah.
Good. Good. Now, we're going to extend this. Okay. Sometimes when we choose the ego and we feel guilty, we attack in various ways. Okay. Sometimes we choose the ego, we feel guilty, we get angry at somebody. Now, using an example that we used several times before, I'm sure we'll use again. We talked about how sometimes we say something nice to a person and they get angry. They take it out of context. They misunderstand. And we talked about how really what's going on is that person felt guilty. The guilt from choosing the ego came up in their mind. They didn't want to deal with it, so they projected it out and they got angry at you. You know you didn't do anything wrong, but since they chose the ego, they projected it out and they're angry at you, even though you didn't do anything wrong. But it shows that when
Yeah,
we choose the
right.
ego, that's right, we get angry, we attack. Okay, now,
Well, yeah, like that actually happened to me last week with a friend of mine who I'm honestly not even sure if she's my friend anymore now.
okay,
She had this really bad breakup like 7 years ago with this kind of like this guy who's just real. I forgot the word. It's when guys who like hate men and the women and they mistreat him. A
okay,
misogynist, and
yeah,
she's like, I mean, we're all like kind of in the cannabis industry, and she's like, there's like the people who are with her and the people who are with him, and a lot of people just stay to the margin. Most people do, but she's actually helped me a lot. But I stopped drinking and she's still drinking. And so, like, we have this kind of a different mindset going on at this point. I went to an event that he put on, and I'm trying to promote like these small farmers and craft farmers and kind of like get the idea out there that it's better than like the Budweiser type of weed, which is just total bullshit, toxic, and it creates poverty because it puts funnels all the money into one place. um a lot of poverty. And so I shared it on my Instagram thing, and I get this rampaging, like extremely angry person, and I've been kind of distancing from her, but it's, I mean, she's done this to me at a lighter level where she just like she gave me some tickets for an event, and then she got like really aggro with me because I don't know, I like didn't hang out with her or she had like some expectation, but she didn't even tell me about it. And like
okay,
I was really sick last year, and she has all these expectations of me that I should be doing this and we should be doing that. And, so it kind of came to a head. And I tried to be nice about it, but honestly, I just ended up telling her that she was giving me PTSD. And I kind of like threw a couple like victim statements at her, and I was like, I just need space because I can't even read your letter. It gives me PTSD. So I kind of like gave myself like an excuse for space, but I don't know how to deal with shit like that. When
Mm,
people are just
okay.
mad at me for no reason,
Okay. Well, we could talk about
I
that.
might have
Let's.
attracted it because I was dealing with that issue with my dad and I was thinking about that stuff a lot. You know how
Let's.
Esther
But let's
Hicks
stick
says
with
that
this
you
one
attract
detail,
the
though.
same thing.
But
Yeah.
let's stick with this one aspect, though. So the observation is that the person was upset at you outside of the bounds of what seemed reasonable. It didn't seem like you did anything to the person
It
to
looks
make
like
them upset, but they were
I'm
upset.
sure I did something, but like she she was basically looking for a reason to, I mean, like once she got angry at me, the whole cascade just came loose. And like
Okay.
anything I said to her was interpreted negatively, and anything that I had done ever in the past, like when she was crying because she couldn't find a boyfriend, and I said, well, I mean, I don't know, you gained a little weight, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like she said, oh, you're calling me fat every day and like blah blah blah. And
Okay. So I mean, that seems like a relevant example. So in other words, what it seems is going on is so. In other words, from the course's perspective, it would say that looking at the image again, the guilt. So this guilt right here, again, this is the guilt from the mind choosing the ego is unconscious in our minds. So here, when we experience ourselves in the world, when that guilt starts to surface, we get afraid of it. We want to run away from it. So we project it out and we get angry at somebody, we attack somebody in whatever way. This takes many forms, all the forms of attacking and hatred. So going back to the people we were talking about, all those, you know, government people or crazy people who are destroying the world or whatever the case is, that's another form that the projection takes. The guilt comes up, it feels terrible, you want to get away from it. Okay, so maybe somebody yells at somebody, maybe somebody tries to get rich, regardless of the consequences, regardless of if the environment is destroyed, regardless if people are made into poverty. Whatever the case is the effect of the choice for the ego. So what that means is, one, if that person forgives, just like that thought process we went earlier, if we recognize that, okay, I'm misbehaving in this way because obviously my guilt is coming to the surface. I'm wanting to get away from it. I chose the ego. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm afraid. I want to attack. I want to um, destroy. I want to covet. I want to. I don't know what's a good word for getting all the resources, whatever the case is. Is my guilt coming to the surface because of my choice for the ego? But the miracle says that that choice for the ego, it didn't really affect heaven. The choice that I think that I made for the ego that I'm so afraid of, and I'm doing all of these things to get to one away from, that choice itself is illusory. So I can let myself off the hook, right? Which means that I'm innocent. All the people I attacked are innocent, and I can start to repair my own mind and maybe start uh, uh, projecting love into the world or extending love into the world. Everyone is in a position to make that choice. Now, what this also means
yeah,
is now,
about that, like I do project love. Like we do this Beyond the Goddess magazine, and my intention is like to project like, working together, cooperation, regenerative practices, love. We talk about love a lot and respect. And
well, keep in
she
mind, I'm
actually
not
said,
talking
"Oh, and
about,
you're all so
well,
high
well,
and
keep in mind,
mighty."
keep in mind, I'm not necessarily talking about, you know, remember that somebody can do, uh, something in the world that seems very uh, charitable, but is still coming from the ego. It's like somebody could do something that seems very like calling the police on a robbery. You think, oh my gosh, you didn't forgive that person, but it's just a normal thing to do. The point is not is the point I'm making here is simply that whenever we choose the ego, we're making the same choice as all those people we judge. So we're doing the same thing, at least at that level. If we're judging whoever for doing whatever, and we're saying I would never do that, in that very moment that we're judging them, we're doing the same thing by choosing the ego. In that very
Well, I
moment,
have
there's no
done what she's doing because I used to be way sicker, so I totally get it. I
okay.
just don't know
Well,
how
that's
to
an
deal with it
example of
on this side.
well, that's an example of even on the level of the world, you did the same thing. What I'm saying is, even if we don't do the same thing at the level of the world, even if we think I would never do what that person did, when
Oh
we
yeah,
choose
like
the
the
ego,
genocide. Okay.
exactly. When we choose the ego, even if it's something small, we choose the ego on, at that moment we are doing the same thing. Because that person
Like to
would not
judge
be
the people like the
exactly,
Israelis that are doing genocide?
exactly. They're if somebody's doing a genocide, like let's say I'm not familiar with that with that dynamic, but I know going to Hitler, I'm familiar with Hitler. Like he basically, my understanding is had an idea of the master
Well, I
race,
mean,
and
honestly, it's kind of the same thing, so it's a good example.
okay, good. So he had an idea of the master race, and these people are lesser, or these people are doing all these. Like I saw images where the Nazis like made them with like giant noses, like they made these characters as how they look, and they say, we have to
Yeah.
exterminate these people. Okay, he chose the ego. He chose the ego to believe in separation, to believe in division, right? And he was in a position to where his choice for the ego was able to manifest in the world as genocide. But the choice for the ego itself is no different than the choice for the ego that your friend made when she was projecting onto you, or the choice for the ego that a child makes when they bully a kid in school. It's the same choice for the ego that manifests at the level we can manifest it at, you know? So a little kid at school who's bullying another kid, I mean, we can't call that genocide, but the choice for the
No.
ego that that person made is the same choice for the ego that Hitler made. But he's at the head of a big nation, so he starts doing genocide. You know, which is also to say, even if we think we were in a certain situation and we believe we would not do the same thing, we can't really say that because we're not in that situation. That's another thing. An example is there was a psychological experiment. I think it was called the Milgram experiment. I don't remember the exact name. But what happened is they took some people, just normal people, and what they did was they split them into two groups. And there was the prisoner group, and there was um, the guard group. And they like my understanding is they set up some like mock prison, and the prisoner type people they put them in the cells, and the guard type people was outside, and they monitored this thing go on for like I don't know a few weeks or a few months, and over time, the people who took the role of prisoner were getting more and more dejected, and the people who were taking the role as guard were getting more and more, um, you know, putting the people down and treating them badly, and it got to the point where they started abusing the people, and they started really taking on the role of this, wicked guard and those worthless people, and the dynamic became so bad that they had to end the experiment because the people who were being prisoners was really starting to get like abused and treated badly. It's probably a bad paraphrasing of the experiment, but you could look it up and get the accurate details. But I just say that to say
Wow,
that
that's
you had these
hardcore.
normal. Say again.
I said, wow, that's hardcore.
Yeah. So, but these are normal people, but they were put in a situation where they were able to either have power over people as the guard, or in a position where they were subject to the tyranny of the guard, and each of the groups of people fell into that role. So the fact is, I know it seems like Yeah, I would never do what they do, but the fact is you don't really know because you're not in that situation, you know. And if we choose the ego, it's possible that we could do the same thing. And that's just one example. There's another example I heard. Um, what is his name? Jordan Peterson talk about where um, I think the name of the book is called Ordinary Men, and he talked about how we were talking about the Nazi Germany earlier. Hitler didn't do that by himself. He wasn't like one man running around putting people in the gas chambers, right? He had people working for him
Yeah.
doing that. And these were regular
Yeah.
people, and that's what the book was about. These are these regular people who go home to their wives and stuff like that. But yet, over time, it got to the point where they're loading their neighbors into the train to go to the gas chamber. And these are
Yeah.
probably people who, just like you, would have said, I would never do that. I'm sure if we walk down the street and we ask people, hey, what if Hitler rose again? Would you be the one putting somebody in the gas chamber? No, I would never do that. But people did that. So the fact is, you cannot say in 100% accuracy that you would not do the things that those people do because you're not in that scenario. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. And the only way we can absolutely know is if we never choose the ego. If you're perfectly enlightened, well, you never choose the ego, which means you never get angry, you never get upset, you never get afraid, you never judge anyone, then that person could say that, you know. But we're not there yet, so we can't really say that. So what that means is we need to be humble when we look at all these people we judge, because like thinking back to the Christian slogan, but for the grace of God go I. And again, going back to that prison experiment, all that was needed was for that person to get in that position, that scenario, and they became a tyrant. So for one, this should help us to forgive. And this is what it all boils down to. And so when we look at this image again, this dot up here, this is all of us. All of us is part of that one mind that made that choice for the ego. And when it gets projected out, we all seem to be individual and all, but we all can think back to our lives when we chose the ego and was overly angry at somebody, or overly judgmental, or overly whatever we were. Whatever form it took in our lives, that's the form it took in our lives. But every single form of what we see in the world, it all goes back to that same choice, right? So that's why going back to chapter 21, that verse you read, maybe that makes more sense now, right? And maybe we should go back to it again. Let's go back to chapter 21 again, and we'll look at that verse with this understanding in mind. So I guess it's chapter 21, the introduction to chapter 21. So it says, damnation is your judgment on yourself, and this you will project upon the world. See it as damned, and all you see is what you did to hurt the Son of God. So what we think we did to hurt the Son of God subconsciously, as one mind, is choosing the ego that destroyed heaven, supposedly, and projected this world of separation in the first place. If you behold disaster and catastrophe, you try to crucify him. If you see holiness and hope, you draw on the will of God to set him free. There is no choice that lies between there's no choice that lies between these two decisions. So every single moment, we're always choosing one of these two choices. And again, it takes different forms. This is not to say that, you know, if I see an actual physical flood in the world, that this is not what they're talking about. There's floods and there's hurricanes and things like that. But if I look at you and I see you as the disaster, I see you as this hateful, mean person that I need to hate, or I need to fear, or I need to judge in whatever way. That's what it's talking about. It's the disaster of my projection of my guilt onto the world. Ultimately, that's what it's talking about.
Yeah.
And of course, it does take the
Well,
form of that, of disaster in the world. But ultimately, is always talking about the disaster of my own guilt and judgment that I project onto you. And then it takes the form of being angry, of being judgmental, of putting somebody in the gas chamber, of pushing a little kid down at school, the little bully in that school, whatever form it takes. But the only way you're going to ultimately learn to forgive and experience peace. Is to learn to recognize that choice is the same choice in everybody, and ultimately we're all the same. Ultimately, we all have the ability to choose between the ego and the Holy Spirit. And me as a miracle worker, the way that I become an example to you is to make that choice for myself and let go of my judgments and learn to forgive. And again, that's the miracle,
Yeah.
right?
Well, one thing I did do, um, after this whole event is I was listening to Abraham Hicks, and she's not quite as in detail as the course, but I noticed that, um, I understood what she was saying for the first time a lot better
Okay.
than I had ever understood because of the course. And so every time I would get like these negative feelings about Season or about my dad, I would just let them go. And I would avoid going into the ego of either being like better than or into the ego of like making myself a victim or making her bad or something like that.
It sounds like I'm moving in the right
So
direction.
yeah, I figure I'm actually pretty good at being vigilant in that sense. It's pretty hard for me to just stay, but I can actually be vigilant and
And that's a very good
at
recognition, by the way,
least I
that is
can,
hard sometimes.
yeah. No, I'm pretty good at recognizing things because I've been chronically ill for a long time. I don't know how to recognize them. I'm pretty screwed. It's kind of the only thing that I've had guaranteed on my side for a long time. Like, if I
I
can
think I missed
recognize
that
what's
last thing.
happening,
Would you say that one more time?
it's kind of the, it's kind of the only thing that I've had guaranteed on my side for a long time. If I can recognize what's actually going on,
Hmm,
um, I can at least try and do something about it.
hmm. That's right. That is true. And of course, does actually mention that. So this verse may actually help you. I don't believe we got to this verse yet. Let me find it real fast. Let's go to uh, chapter 15, section 3. And this is just one of the different versions of this one. And I'll write it down as well. So this is on the left side of the screen. So this is Tech chapter 15, uh, section 3, and we'll go to paragraph 4. So text 15, section 3, paragraph 4.
Oh, wait, wait. Yeah, I think.
And
Wait a
it
minute.
says, there is no doubt.
Okay. Yes.
All right. So it says, there is no doubt about what your function is, for the Holy Spirit knows what it is, which we know now is the miracle. There is no doubt about its magnitude, for it reaches. Go ahead.
No, it's good. I had to come into the store for a second. I'm
Okay.
not buying anything now. So I'm already out. Go ahead.
Certainly. So there's no doubt, and it says there's no doubt about its magnitude, for it reaches you through him from magnitude. You do not have to strive for it because you have it. All your striving must be directed against littleness, for it does require vigilance to protect your magnitude in this world. And what it simply means is the world is projected again from that choice for the ego. So that's what we see. That's what we're that's the default, I guess you can say. The initial choice we made was for the ego. So that's what we project. So as you said, we have to be vigilant and looking for recognizing the fact that we're judging that we're projecting. So then we could apply the miracle and forgive. You'll see this throughout the course, the need to be vigilant. Early in the course, it talks about being miracle readiness, being in a state of miracle readiness, or being ready to forgive. And some of the masters mention it like that as well. Being ready to forgive, being on the lookout for it. So it's good to recognize that, and there's not anything to feel bad about that. You don't do it all the time because pretty sure only an enlightened being will be able to do it all the time. But they could do it all the time because they don't have any guilt because they forgave anything, but everything already. But everybody else, all the rest of us, that guilt comes up. We afraid of it. We deny it. We project it out. Then we're angry. We judgmental, and that's going to act out in some way. Whether we send an angry email or we, attack somebody in whatever way, and we could recognize that it'll help us. Not only will we see it in ourselves, but when we see it in others as well. It can help us to let go of our judgment of these people when we realize that okay, that guilt came out. They chose the ego. Maybe don't even know there's another choice. Again, that doesn't mean that we don't, somebody's attacking us, we can physically defend ourselves. If, just like if we hungry, we eat, do all the normal things in the world. But when it comes to the judgment that we have, we can start to forgive by recognizing that we're all the same. Everybody's the same. Everybody has the choice between the ego and the Holy Spirit. Everyone has made the mistaken choice and can choose again, and we could be the example of choosing again by our own forgiveness and our own miracle working, which is practice of forgiveness.
Yeah. Um, my life has been very full of opportunities to forgive. And actually, I mean, I guess I could have left the abusive situation before, but I recall in the beginning when I noticed how bad it got when I fought back. I was like, okay, I'm just going to be the peaceful person here, and I'm going to dedicate myself to creating peace. And I tried as hard as I could to be forgiving and understanding. What I didn't do is probably forgive myself enough to
Mm.
actually leave the situation.
It's a good recognition.
And I don't think I would have been capable. I think my life would have been hell if right now still if he hadn't died. Even
Mm.
if we were divorced, I don't think I would have been able to heal myself as much because I just had honestly too much guilt
Mm.
about
Well, let's look at that.
everything. I've
Those are
spent
some
the
really
last
good
three
recognition.
years immersed in guilt about a whole bunch of stuff. Like I even thought it was my fault that he died of cancer. Like, hello,
Mm.
not my fault. I was the one who was trying to get him to face the condition that we had more seriously and eat better.
You mean a
That
medical
doesn't make it
condition,
my
the
fault.
cancer condition?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we had Lyme, and I
Okay.
knew that it had to do with viruses and a bunch of other stuff that could cause cancer. But he didn't take anything seriously because he would rather project on me that I'm just this fucking crazy person who everything that she does fails without actually being. If he would have been honest, he would have realized that he was extremely aggressive. He had an anger problem, a sex addiction, and he was constantly using other people's uh, qualities to take on as his own and embody them as if they were his. And he was also addicted to food. Like he would eat whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. He didn't want to like I guess probably pleasures.
Mm.
And he didn't want to ever take responsibility for anything unless it was something that would make him look better. And
Well,
he might have been a real sweetie pie sometimes and real adventurous and real fun, funny or whatever.
Well, there's one thing in
But
this uh, uh, train of events that's I think is important to highlight before we close up, and I think you touched upon it yourself as well. Um, it's not necessary to stay in a bad situation with the idea that this is my forgiveness lesson, so I need to stay here. And you touched upon it that maybe it was just your own guilt that wouldn't allow you to leave. So that's very relevant. So
my own
oftentimes we
guilt
do
and
forgive.
fear.
There you go. Good. The miracle helps
I
with
was
that as well.
terrified of everything, of the world, of being on my own, of having a panic attack in public and getting thrown into jail or something, because I was having serious panic attacks too.
Well, keep in mind
Being
that
homeless.
it's not necessary for the person to die for you to heal yourself. So keep that in mind because that will place a limit on the miracle. If you think the only way I can really heal myself if you know, and again, this is not to say we need to again we're not to say we need to stay in a bad situation, but let's say we can't leave at the moment, or let's say we do leave and the person is still over there, whether it's next door or in the other country, and we know they're still there, whatever the case is, we can still always forgive and heal our mind because there's no limits on the miracle because there's no hierarchy of illusion. So keep that in mind. Um, but again, certain situations may be difficult in the moment. So if you can get yourself out the situation, if it's a bad situation and it's a difficult situation, it's fine to do that. But just know that if you can't for whatever reason, or let's say you divorce the person, but they're on the other side of the planet, but you still think about the person and you know they're there, you can still forgive if you can't get out the situation. But it's always practical to try to do so if it's a bad situation and you want to be out of it if you can. And
What
forgiving
about if
yourself,
they're
forgiving.
what
Go
about
ahead.
if they're temporarily returned to the oneness?
If they're dead, it's the forgiveness is the same.
Yeah.
Dying doesn't return you to oneness, and maybe we could talk about that
Okay.
next week.
Let's
But
talk about that.
dying is yeah, yeah.
What
Only
does that do?
enlightenment does that. You just basically ready to reincarnate again. And that's where reincarnation happens. That's why the course says that this will save you from learning that might take thousands of years. It says thousands of years. Who do we know that's lived for 1,000 years? I don't know anybody that's lived for 1,000 years. So
Yeah.
would that make sense if we come back again and again and again, acting out this guilt over and over again until we forgive it? So they die, and we could talk about you know things that you could experience after you die. Like I had out about experiences where I saw it a little bit. Um but in it they end up reincarnated again, and you still have to work through the guilt. So it doesn't but again, that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you can forgive whether they're alive or dead. That has no effect on the fact that any judgment you have in yourself against the person, you could always forgive them, whether they're next to you, whether they're on the other side of the world, whether they're dead, doesn't matter. It has no impact on the fact that you can forgive because, again, the negative emotions you feel is always from your own choice for the ego. So they were never really the problem anyway. I know they seem to be the problem, but it's always a projection, which means we could always make the choice again, which goes back to the example of how people could be mad at us when we didn't do anything, because it's always the case that when we're upset, there's always our own guilt coming to the surface, and we could either project it onto somebody else, and now we're angry at them, whether they did something or not, or we can forgive. So this is a good place to end. I'll be back
Yeah.
at 8:30, and remember I'll post this for you. So what I'll do is the first Sunday of each month, I'll I will post that recording so it'll be there for you for whoever wants to have it, and I'll still have the other recordings if people want to purchase additional ones. But just give me like what 10
I don't
minutes,
know
and
how
this
to I have no idea where that would be or anything.
oh, what I'll do, I'll put the link in this video. So when I upload this video, I'll put the link to the recordings in this video, so you'll be able to watch this video and you'll be able to just click the link in the description, and it'll take you to the other recordings if you want more.